The absence of hobbits in the Silmarillion isn't merely an oversight. It's a calculated omission that reflects their unassuming nature in Tolkien's mythos. Hobbits, as described in the prologue to The Lord of the Rings, lived quietly in the Shire during the Third Age, far removed from the grand conflicts of earlier ages. This lack of mention emphasizes their humble beginnings, contrasting them with the epic struggles of the First and Second Ages. In the Elder Days, the focus was on the monumental tales of the Eldar, the Valar, and the rise and fall of great kingdoms like Númenor. Hobbits were likely evolving in obscurity, living unnoticed in the shadow of these great events. Tolkien hints at this indirectly in his letters, suggesting the Hobbits' importance lies in their ordinariness, which emerges as their strength in the Third Age. However, could Hobbits have played an indirect role in the deeper lore of Middle-earth? Consider this: their resilience, their connection to the Earth, and their remarkable resistance to the corrupting power of the One Ring all suggest a deeper, albeit hidden, role. Perhaps their very nature was a quiet response to the tumultuous and often destructive events of the earlier ages. It's tempting to speculate on the possibility that hobbits, as a race, were preserved or even guided by a subtle will, perhaps of Yavanna, who cared deeply for all living things connected to the earth. Yavanna's influence might explain the hobbits' inherent love for growing things and their seemingly charmed existence in the Shire, protected from outside turmoil, probably. This absence of hobbits in the Silmarillion also aligns with Tolkien's narrative priorities. The First and Second Ages are tales of cosmic stakes: the battle against Morgoth, the forging of the Silmarils, and the downfall of Númenor. Hobbits, who embody the small, quiet virtues of humility and perseverance, would have seemed out of place in these larger-than-life sagas. Their moment would come later, at a time when these virtues were desperately needed to counter Sauron's shadow. Digging deeper into the question of why hobbits are missing from the Silmarillion, we must consider their ancestry and early development. Tolkien classified hobbits as a branch of men, specifically a diminutive and agrarian offshoot, living quietly in the vales and woods of Middle-earth. They likely diverged from other Edain-like groups early in the Second Age, retreating to remote regions where they escaped notice from chroniclers like the Elves and Dúnedain. In the Peoples of Middle-earth, Tolkien theorizes about their pre-Shire existence, stating that hobbits lived in the Anduin Vales east of the Misty Mountains, near Greenwood the Great, later Mirkwood. During the Third Age, around the year 1050, they began migrating westward, fleeing from the growing shadow of Dol Guldur. These migrations suggest that, while hobbits lived in relative obscurity, they were not entirely untouched by the larger movements of Middle-earth's history. The lack of recorded hobbit history in the First and Second Ages isn't a dismissal of their importance, but rather a reflection of the elves' perspective, as they were the primary chroniclers of the Silmarillion. To the immortal Eldar, hobbits would have seemed insignificant, their quiet lives irrelevant amidst the cosmic struggles against Morgoth and Sauron. Moreover, hobbits actively sought to avoid attention, a cultural instinct that served as a survival mechanism in a world rife with danger. This instinct is exemplified in their dealings with outsiders even in the Third Age, as seen in Bilbo's initial reluctance to leave the Shire and the hobbits' general distrust of big folk. Hobbits' defining characteristics, resilience, humility, and resistance to corruption, can be seen as virtues forged in response to the trials of the early ages. Their remarkable resistance to the One Ring, for instance, suggests a purity of spirit that might be rooted in their isolation and connection to the natural world. If Yavanna indeed had a hand in the Hobbits' preservation, it could have been a part of Eru Ilúvatar's grand design. Hobbits, seemingly unremarkable, would embody a hidden strength, a foil to the hubris of elves and men. Their absence in the Silmarillion might then be viewed not as an oversight, but as a deliberate narrative device, keeping their potential shrouded until the time of their greatest need. Contributed? Their unassuming nature could have made them ideal spies, or messengers during the wars against Morgoth, slipping unnoticed behind enemy lines. Yet their aversion to conflict and preference for peace align with their omission from these tales. Their strength lay not in battle, but in preserving the quiet virtues of hope and endurance. The stage was set for hobbits to emerge when the world needed them most, when brute force and grand heroics failed to stem Sauron's rise. Their moment, heralded by Bilbo and Frodo, was a culmination of Eru's divine symphony, where the smallest hands would change the course of history. One of the most compelling aspects of hobbits is their ethos, deeply tied to the values of community, humility, and an intrinsic love for the land. These qualities, while seemingly mundane, are a subtle but profound counterpoint to the grand ambitions and flaws of other races in Middle-earth. Stand in the shadows. The elves, while immortal and wise, are often burdened by pride and the weight of their past. The dwarfs are consumed by their lust for wealth and their familial feuds. Men, though valiant, are susceptible to corruption and their own mortality. Hobbits, on the other hand, represent a quiet balance, a living embodiment of Tolkien's belief in the power of simple, good-hearted individuals to stand against monumental darkness. Tolkien's writings suggest that the simplicity of hobbits is a kind of power in itself. The fact that Frodo, Sam, and even Bilbo could resist the One Ring longer than mightier beings like Boromir or even Galadriel speaks volumes. This resistance is not just about physical endurance, but an unshakable connection to the humble joys of life: food, family, and friendship. Had hobbits existed in the First or Second Ages, their cultural focus on these simple virtues might have brought a grounding influence to the grandeur and chaos of those times. For instance, their resistance to the lure of power could have served as a quiet rebuke to the Noldor during their tragic quest for the Silmarils, where pride led to endless strife. The Valar, particularly Yavanna and Varda, played a critical role in shaping the destiny of Middle-earth. Yavanna's love for all living things, especially those tied to the earth, hints at a spiritual connection with hobbits. In the Ainul Lindale, Yavanna speaks of her desire to preserve the green things of Arda, and her concern for creatures like Ents and eagles might extend to the hobbits' agrarian lifestyle. This link also aligns with the hobbits' distinct absence in the Silmarillion tales. They were nurtured in obscurity, perhaps intentionally shielded by divine design. In this light, hobbits were not excluded from the narrative, but rather hidden, their moment of emergence timed for when they were truly needed. Gandalf, a Maya of Manwë, clearly understood the hobbit's unique role. His involvement with the Shire, from his friendship with Bilbo to his mentorship of Frodo, underscores a foresight shared by few others. Gandalf's choice to entrust the fate of Middle-earth to Frodo, a hobbit, reflects his deep understanding of their quiet strength and even the story of how Bilbo came to possess the ring hints at destiny's hand. In Unfinished Tales, Gandalf recounts that he only visited the Shire on a whim during his wanderings, yet it led to Bilbo's adventure and the eventual finding of the One Ring. Could this chance encounter have been orchestrated by Ilúvatar himself? Though absent from the Silmarillion, the Hobbit's ethos resonates as a contrast to the tragedies of those ages. Their emergence in the Third Age symbolizes hope reborn, a reminder that salvation often comes from the least expected places. This narrative arc reflects Tolkien's Catholic worldview, where humility triumphs over hubris, and providence guides even the smallest of beings. Their omission from the First Age is not a flaw, but a narrative necessity. Had hobbits been introduced earlier, their significance in the Third Age would have diminished. They were, in essence, Tolkien's ace in the deck, a symbol of unforeseen salvation, waiting to step into history when all seemed lost. Next letter. While hobbits do not feature explicitly in the events of the First or Second Ages, Their potential unseen influence and significance extend into the thematic heart of Tolkien's legendarium. Consider their absence as a space for readers to reflect on humility, peace, and the power of the unnoticed in shaping the world. Hobbits, had they existed during the First Age, would have likely embodied the ideals that characters like Finrod Felagund or Beren sought. Finrod's selfless sacrifice for Beren in the quest for a Silmaril reflects the very virtues that hobbits represent: loyalty, selflessness, and a willingness to persevere against overwhelming odds. This thematic overlap suggests that hobbits could have inspired or tempered the actions of the mighty, perhaps even serving as examples of grounded wisdom to leaders like Fingolfin or Turgon. One can also imagine how hobbits might have served as unnoticed custodians of the land during times of great upheaval. As the Noldor warred against Morgoth, leaving scorched fields and ruined forests in their wake, hobbits could have quietly tended the lands, preserving their fertility for future ages. In this way, they would have contributed to the endurance of Middle-earth, in a way unseen by historians, but vital nonetheless. The One Ring's eventual corruption of Sauron is itself a narrative tied to hobbits, though indirectly during earlier ages. The ring, forged in the Second Age, had no match for hobbits in terms of resistance. If Sauron had been aware of their nature, it's possible he might have sought to exploit or eradicate them, recognizing their peculiar strength as a potential weakness to his dominion. This might explain why hobbits lived so long in peace and obscurity. The powers of Middle-earth overlooked them as inconsequential, which proved to be their greatest strength. It's conceivable that proto-hobbits existed during the First and Second Ages, distant relatives to both men and hobbits as we know them. These proto-hobbits might have occupied regions far from the main events chronicled in the Silmarillion. In a world dominated by the great powers of the Valar, Elves, and Morgoth, such beings might have thrived in the margins, unnoticed by even the wisest among the Eldar. The idea of proto-hobbits also aligns with Tolkien's intricate genealogies and his appreciation for deep, interwoven histories. They could have quietly contributed to Middle-earth's survival by passing down oral traditions, conserving knowledge that would later be forgotten by grander civilization. Ultimately, the Hobbit's late emergence in Tolkien's narrative reflects a divine stratagem. Ilúvatar's plan often works through the unexpected and the humble. In the music of the Ainur, the Hobbit's role might have been represented by a subtle, quiet theme. A melody that would not rise until the louder, grander notes of earlier ages had faded. This mirrors the narrative arc of The Lord of the Rings, where hobbits come to prominence not through strength or ambition, but through steadfastness and faith. Hobbits' absence in the Silmarillion is, therefore, a deliberate literary device that reinforces the idea that salvation and strength often come from the least likely sources. It underscores the importance of virtues like humility and resilience, which thrive quietly until they are called upon. Their emergence as central figures in the Third Age is a narrative crescendo, a reminder that the smallest hands can change the course of history. Through their omission, Tolkien invites us to wonder about the stories not told, the quiet lives lived away from the spotlight, and the unseen forces that shape the world. It is in this mystery that the Hobbit's true power lies.